It is the most wonderful time of the year. It's Mercury Retrograde. Aren't you excited? I know what you're thinking. You're probably like, Mercury Retrograde? Oh no, my car is gonna break down. I'm gonna need a new phone. My raggedy ex is gonna be calling me. Like, I'm pretty sure that the first thing you think of when you hear Mercury Retrograde is foolishness and fuckery. And not to say that you're completely wrong. However, Mercury Retrograde is so much more than that. So the purpose of this video is to educate you and to sort of debunk a lot of the cult phenomenon that Mercury Retrograde has become, and to show you what it is actually used for and how to best use the energy. I promise that once you finish this video and once you start implementing some of the things that I'm saying, you are going to come to really like and even look forward to Mercury Retrograde. All right, so stick around. You are definitely not gonna wanna miss this. Hello, my loves. As always, I hope that this video finds you well and in excellent spirits. If this is our first time meeting, welcome. My name is Mel, and I'm a professional astrologer who helps people unlock their divinity and discover their magic, all right? And as always, if you are returning, welcome back. So today's video is all about Mercury Retrograde. At the time of filming this video, we are on the heels of the upcoming Mercury Retrograde, which is going down on August 23rd. So I thought, what better time than now to really educate people on what Mercury Retrograde is and what it isn't, and how to best use the energy. So again, that is the whole purpose of this video. So I'm going to be talking about Mercury generally, and then retrograde generally, putting them both together and talking about Mercury Retrograde generally. And then I'll be giving you some tips on how to best use the energy. All right, so without further ado, let's get into it. All right, as always, let's start with the basics. So let's talk about Mercury and the planetary energy that it exudes. So as a planet, the energy that's associated with Mercury represents thoughts and communication, okay? So just a little background on Mercury generally, right? According to Greek mythology, Mercury was known as the messenger of the gods. Mercury was also known by the name Hermes. Fun fact, if you look at the Nike symbol, Nike has a lot to do with those sandals with the wings on them. That has everything to do with Mercury, because Mercury was like the postman, was the messenger between the gods. When they wanted to communicate with each other, they would invoke Mercury to do the communicating, right? Now, what's interesting is that Mercury, okay, let's put it this way. I don't know how old some of you are, but if you're sort of around my age group, maybe you remember the game Telephone, where you would sit in a circle of friends and someone would start a story and then the story would just circulate around the circle, right? Now, by the time you get to the last person, the story is usually very different than the original story that was created. That is sort of emblematic of Mercury energy. Mercury is also known as the trickster. So in communicating between the gods, Mercury would fudge some details, might instigate something to get two gods to fight. Mercury was with the shits, and Mercury would definitely have that trickster energy. So do you kind of understand now where the whole mishap energy with Mercury Retrograde comes from? It's sort of the essence of Mercury energy generally, okay? But apart from Mercury just being the trickster, like I said before, it has a lot to do with our thoughts and our communication. Not just being the messenger between the gods, Mercury was also quick. And so when we think about Mercury energy, as the planetary energy, thoughts and communication, the speed of Mercury, it's like fast talking, fast communicating. Mercury has a lot to do with learning. So when it comes to the energy that Mercury exudes, it has everything to do with how we relate to people, right? Because our communication is all about relating to people. So it turns out that Mercury energy really focuses and is really directed towards our everyday lives. Because think about it, on an everyday basis, we are communicating with people. Whether we're communicating with people verbally, whether we're communicating with people on the phone, whether we're writing to people, texting people, whatever it is, it's definitely an energy that's part of our daily lives. And that's also another reason why we feel Mercury retrograde so profoundly, because it affects us on a very mundane and daily level, okay? Now, one of the other important things to know about Mercury is that it has a lot to do with our thoughts. So it's not even just about how we communicate with others. It's also about how we communicate with ourselves. What are we thinking? What is our mindset? Mercury has everything to do with that. Now, apart from that stuff, that's sort of the general flavor of Mercury energy. Mercury also has a lot to do with trade and commerce. So when you're transacting business, right? When you are making sales, when you are negotiating, that has everything to do with Mercury retrograde. And as such, has a lot to do with paperwork, right? When it comes to contracts, when it comes to emails, when it comes to letters, correspondence of any kind, that is the realm of Mercury, okay? And again, this all ties into Mercury retrograde, obviously, because we're talking about Mercury as a planet, but also because it affects us on a very daily level. Think about it. We're not only communicating with people every day, most of us are transacting business, whether in our own businesses or whether we work for somebody. But Mercury also deals with learning, especially like school learning, specific knowledge, right? And that is something that many of us do on a daily basis. Some of us may still be in school, or some of us are just learning things as a part of everyday life or as part of our job, right? So again, Mercury covers the gamut with a lot of the things that we do on a daily basis. And not just that, Mercury is the planet that's closest to the Earth. So we're always going to feel Mercury's energy very strongly just because of its proximity to the Earth, okay? So hopefully you're starting to get the flavor of what Mercury is, right? It isn't just this amorphous thing or this cult phenomenon that everything just goes bad when Mercury is retrograde. Part of the foundation of Mercury is that it affects us on a very daily and routine basis. Now, apart from all that, Mercury also governs things like modes of transportation. So cars, trains, buses, any way that you can sort of get around is covered by Mercury energy. And this goes back to what I was saying about Mercury being the messenger of the gods, going back and forth. And again, this is something that we do on a daily basis. We're either driving to work, we're driving to the store, we're going someplace, right? Mercury energy also covers short distance travel. So whether it is just going to school or going to work, whether it's taking a short trip across town, that is all Mercury. And again, it all affects us on a daily basis. All right. So hopefully you're starting to see how Mercury energy works in our lives. All right. So now let's talk about retrogrades. Retrogrades. I know that a lot of people shudder when they hear this word, but trust me, it is really not that bad. So every planet, apart from the sun and moon, will go retrograde at some point in time for a specific amount of time. Now, the specifics as to how often and for how long a planet goes retrograde depends on its orbit. The longer the orbit, the longer the retrograde period. Now, Mercury is a very fast and speedy moving planet, right? So it ends up that Mercury ends up going retrograde 3 to 4 times a year, and it stays retrograde for typically around 3 weeks. So what is retrograde anyway? If you look at just the word in general, you kind of think that it means backward, right? Like you walk forward, you walk backward. Retrograde is backward. So many people mistakenly believe that when Mercury or any planet is retrograde, it's actually going backward. It's not. It looks like it's going backward from our vantage point on Earth. But what retrograde really means is that the planetary motion slows down. And this is very important and speaks to the importance of retrogrades, period. It's a period when the planetary energy slows down, and therefore, so should we. Now, things from the past typically come up during retrogrades, and that's for a very important reason. The way that the universe is designed, the way that it's set up for us here on Earth, we have periods where there are when it's like forward momentum, when it's time to go forward. And then there's times where we have to sort of rein things in. A lot of times retrograde period is meant to cultivate energy. And then when the energy of the planet goes direct, that's when we sort of exude that energy, when we express that energy, and when we use that energy, right? So it's a period of cultivation versus a period of use or expansion, okay? That's sort of how you can differentiate between retrograde and direct, right? Retrograde is also a time for the re's. Retrograde starts with R-E, so a lot of the words that begin with R-E are very relevant, R-E, during retrograde periods, right? Things like remembering, reliving, reminiscing, reviewing, revising, revisiting. I think I might have said that one already, but you get the point, right? It's all about doing things over again. And for some people, it's like, there's certain things you feel like you don't want to repeat, right? Well, retrograde period sort of allows you to review these things in the sense that if you went through a difficult period and you find that the same situation is arising during retrograde, the fact that the planetary energy has slowed down allows you to reflect before you act, which is great because if you're not trying to repeat the same thing over again, the fact that you have the ability to reassess the situation means that you don't have to repeat what you didn't want in the first place, right? It's all about reflection. But the thing that I love about retrograde the most is that it allows us to be intentional about what we are doing. When the planetary energy slows down, again, it allows us to slow down. And then we can really reassess and be intentional about the things that are coming up in our lives or the things that are coming back around, okay? And I feel like part of the trickster energy that Mercury exudes, right? And by trickster energy, it's like when Mercury goes retrograde, your phone starts acting up. Your electronics may start acting up. There's miscommunication. It's very hard to express yourself concisely or to feel like you're being understood with what you're trying to say or convey, right? All of that is that Mercury trickster energy. And Mercury does that, at least I believe, so that we can be intentional about what we are doing. It gives us an opportunity to redo things, especially if we didn't do them right or in the way that we wanted to the first time. But ultimately, it allows us to slow down, reassess our lives, and take stock of where we are. You know, Mercury has a lot to do with how we relate to people, right? I think I said this before. And it's in relating to people that we really understand ourselves. Relationships are merely a mirror to ourselves, okay? And so when you find that you have past situations coming back around, it can give you a lot of information on where you're at right now. Also, remember I said that Mercury has a lot to do with our mindset, the way that we think and our thoughts. Whatever's coming back around during Mercury retrograde, it really shows you where your mind was at, what you were thinking. Because remember, thoughts become things. So if you have a whole bunch of situations that you don't like, that you don't want coming back around, it kind of shows you that your mindset just wasn't where it really should have been for you, right? Exes coming back around is a somewhat common occurrence during Mercury retrograde, okay? However, not really. And it all depends on how your particular natal chart is set up, okay? Like, don't just put this, it's not this blanket statement that your ex always comes back when it's Mercury retrograde. At the time of filming this video, Venus is also retrograde, which is really when exes come back, right? However, Mercury retrograde allows you to reassess the situations, the people, the relationships, your mindset, and recalibrate and make changes and tweak things so that when Mercury finally goes direct after 3 weeks, now you have all this information you gained during the retrograde period that you can put to use and actually make change. This is how change occurs in our life, right? It's not so much about we just wake up one day and things are just different, although that can happen, right? Sometimes we have a lot of situations and a lot of happenings that are outside of our control. and things just change, right? But a lot of times we are the agent of change. Not a lot of times, we are the agents of change in our lives. And retrograde seasons really just give you the opportunity to reassess so you can make changes. That's why I said, I feel like once you really understand what Mercury retrograde is, that's when you will start to understand that this is a time for you to recalibrate. It's a time to reassess your life. It's a time to get your life in order. It's a time to get your mindset in order. If we're talking about Mercury retrograde specifically. And so this is a time where you can really make profound change in your life. Yes, it can be annoying because yes, your phone might not be working. You may not be able to communicate effectively. There's miscommunication. There's delays, especially when it comes to transit and travel and things like that, right? Yeah, that's annoying. But guess what? It also allows you to slow down. I feel like we live in a culture where, especially here in the West, it's always go, 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 hustle, 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 grind, grind, grind. That leads to burnout very quickly, right? Retrograde allows you to slow down a bit, be more intentional, especially when it comes to communication, AKA Mercury energy, right? This is about being intentional about your words, being intentional about your communication, being intentional about your thoughts. The energy slows down and so do you, so that you can become more present, more aware, and therefore more intentional. And when you're more intentional, that's when you can start making changes. That's when you can start manifesting consciously. That's when you can start really creating your reality. So think of retrograde periods as kind of like a gift from the universe. Again, it's a time to slow down. It's a time to recalibrate, reassess, and be intentional about what we want and what we don't want. All right. All right. So now let's talk about some tips for surviving Mercury retrograde. All right. Because I know that that's kind of how that's sort of the information that people want to know, right? Because they feel like their life is going to go to shit and they want to know how to survive Mercury retrograde. So let's talk about it. So like I said, Mercury rules communication. It rules thoughts. It rules modes of transportation. So when it comes to communication, number one, you're going to want to double and triple check everything that you are writing and that you are sending. Mercury retrograde is ripe for replying all when you only needed to reply to one person on that email chain, right? So you're going to want to double check everything. Make sure that your grammar is on point. Make sure that you're communicating effectively, that you're saying what you really want to say, that it's going to the right person, that the text message makes sense. You're not sending it to the wrong person, right? You want to be intentional about your communication. And also speaking of communication, you're going to want to have grace for yourself and others. Mercury retrograde is a time when miscommunication is abundant, right? So in talking to people, especially if you need to have serious conversations, especially conversations having to do with business or negotiation, you want to check in with people and make sure that they really understand what you're saying. Kind of like, you know, when you are ordering food and you call it in, right? And you kind of want the person to read back your order so that you know that they got your order correct. Same thing with communication. You'll want to make sure that people really understand you. You want to make sure that you really understand people. So just double check and check in with people. Make sure, is this what you meant? Did you mean to say this? Or I meant this. Is this what you understood, right? Those are some of the questions you may want to ask of your counterparts when communicating during Mercury retrograde, okay? Next, Mercury also rules thoughts. This is the time to really take stock of your mental state. Think about the thoughts that are coming up. What are they saying? How do you speak to yourself, right? What is your inside chatter like? Is it negative? Is it condescending? Is it critical? With that energy of Mercury slowing down, this is the time for you to slow down and reassess. What are you saying to yourself on a daily basis? Are you merely parroting what other people are saying to you? Are you having original thoughts? Are the things that you say and think about yourself in alignment with who you really are? Are you kind to yourself, right? This may sound very woo-woo and whatever, but it helps. Again, retrograde period is a time to be intentional. And you don't want to be intentional about bullshit. You don't want to be intentional about negative thoughts. You don't want to be intentional about repeating negative mental chatter that's only going to manifest in your reality as negativity, right? So it's about taking stock of your thoughts. And then number 3, when it comes to modes of transportation, be flexible. Leave earlier if you can. Allot for delays, allot time for late trains, more traffic, right? This is the time where you're going to want to sort of ride the wave of whatever electronic malfunctions are happening. Now, a lot of people will say that you don't want to buy electronics during Mercury retrograde, and that may or not be true. For some, if you can't help it, like if your computer completely breaks down and you need a new one right away, I wouldn't say, well, wait for 3 weeks before you buy a new computer, right? Just be mindful that you may have to make a return or you may have to replace a part, right? These kind of things tend to happen during Mercury retrograde. And again, it's all to get us to slow down. That communication, that being on, that grind, that hustle, it's about slowing down. So maybe if you are experiencing an electronic malfunction, maybe it's time to put the phone away. Maybe it's time to just chill out. Maybe it's time to not be on your computer all damn day, right? This is about slowing down and being intentional. So ride the wave of electronic malfunctions, leave extra time for travel, be flexible to travel plans. I know several people who've been, traveling extensively over the last couple of weeks, and they've been seeing a lot of delays, a lot of cancellations, like that stuff might ramp up during Mercury retrograde. That's kind of just how it goes. And you kind of just, again, have to ride the wave, roll with the punches, and try not to get so flustered. Try not to get so upset. You know this is coming. I love that we live in an age now where astrology is super mainstream and that you just have people being like, oh, it's Mercury retrograde. Like, that's just what it is. Like, I know that this is going to break down. I know I'm going to need this, or I know, I love that. But also, don't use Mercury retrograde as an excuse for bad behavior. Say what you mean, right? Have grace for people and understanding that miscommunication may happen, but don't just be a dick and be like, oh, well, it's Mercury retrograde, it's whatever. We don't use astrology to excuse bad behavior over here, all right? So keep that in mind. But again, Mercury retrograde is a really nice time to be intentional, to slow down, and to recalibrate. So use it as such. And again, don't be uptight, don't be inflexible, don't be stuck in your ways. This is a time to be flexible, open-minded, and roll with the punches, all right? All right, so I want to take just a brief moment to talk about the upcoming Mercury retrograde, which is going down on August 23rd, 2023. And Mercury is going to be going retrograde in its home sign of Virgo, okay? So here's the thing about 2023. All of the Mercury retrogrades are going down in earth signs. So you're going to want to look at your natal chart and you're going to want to see where Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo are. This is where all of the Mercury retrogrades are going down this year, okay? So now when Mercury is retrograde in earth signs rule tangible things, right? So this is when we really see our electronics run amok. When we see our cars breaking down, when we see physical, tangible things sort of going haywire. So again, you're going to want to be flexible, open-minded, and roll with the punches with that. Now, Virgo is a sign that is known for perfectionism, attention to detail, right? Mercury thrives in Virgo because Virgo is analytical. Virgo is efficient and all about organizing. So Mercury loves being in Virgo. And so long story short, when it comes to Mercury retrograde in Virgo, this is when we have the opportunity to clean up our lives, right? This is when we tend to unopened bills, when we tend to unopened mail, when we clear the clutter, right? Whether it's physical clutter or whether it's mental clutter. This is when we go over paperwork. Now, don't get me wrong. Mercury retrograde in Virgo is not sexy. This is not one of those things where your ex is coming back and spitting out their love for you and bearing their soul to you. No, this is about you getting your life together. This is about you organizing. This is about getting clean. This is about attending to health matters. Virgo has a lot to do with health. And so this is the time where you may want to go over your lab work, right? Where you want to do a full body tune-up and checkup during this time. It allows us to reorganize our lives. Remember how I said before that we are in this society that's go, 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 grind, grind, grind. This is like, you know, when you're busy and you just don't have the time to clean up your workstation, clean up your house. Mercury retrograde in Virgo is like, all right, things are slowing down now. Let's get the mister clean. Let's get the duster. Let's get the vacuum and the mop and really clean everything up. Now, because Mercury has a lot to do with communication and has a lot to do with paperwork, this is when you'll want to review contracts. This is when you'll want to review other types of important paperwork, like your insurance policy, your 401k policy, any kind of important paperwork, especially paperwork having to do with your day-to-day activities, whatever that paperwork may be. This is the time to address it because especially we're at the tail end of summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. You know, summertime, nobody really wants to do anything serious anyway. Mercury retrograde in Virgo is kind of reining us back in, right? It's like, all right, you've had your fun. Now is the time to really get organized, get efficient. And if you take the 3 weeks and use Mercury retrograde for organizing, getting efficient, by the time Mercury goes direct in September, you will be able to hit the ground running with new things, right? The energy will be direct. It's going to speed back up, and so can we. And now that we've got our lives in order, now that we're more efficient, now that we've gotten our paperwork together and we've triple checked everything, now we can hit the ground running and really make some changes. All right. So as unsexy as Mercury retrograde in Virgo is, it's also very necessary. So use the energy for what it is for. Again, to be intentional and to recalibrate our lives. And with Mercury in Virgo, it's going to be organizing and being efficient. All right. Again, not sexy, but totally necessary. All right, my loves. So that concludes this video on Mercury retrograde. I sincerely hope that you were able to finally understand what it is and understand what you can use the energy for. And hopefully, thanks to this video, you will come to appreciate retrograde periods, especially Mercury retrograde periods. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in. Have an amazing, and I really mean this, have an amazing Mercury retrograde. And I will see you in my next video. Take care.